Chapter 176. The Takeover of ELT Trading Company. 3 days before the new term begins. Students had started returning to the dormitories one by one, and news of the catastrophe at the Rothtaylor mansion had begun to trickle into Achen Island. Students who had gone home for the holidays were bringing the news with them as they returned to Achen Island. After making my presence known at the ELT Trading Company, I returned to the camp and immediately began reaching out to contacts. The reshuffling of power within the ELT Trading Company was deeply intertwined with the reorganization of the imperial power. Considering the heavy hitters involved in the background, it was a burden to ask for help from anyone. The Student Council president is also returning soon. I hope everything at home concluded well. Quote, despite needing help immediately to share information about my plan, somehow. Zix, why is your face like that? I had a fight with Elka. Quote, do you two even fight? It's a long story. Zix Effelstein, the second-year vice president of the magic department, sported a cheek swollen in the shape of a palm. It was obvious he wasn't the type to be slapped around, so there was no need to ask who the culprit was. I tried to offer various kinds of help to Elka under the guise of assisting in her daily life at the Lortel mansion. It seems my approach was too wild-friendly. What on earth did you do to make that well-behaved librarian slap you? When I was at the Isla mansion or Ophelius mansion, I was always attended to during my baths. Worried that Elka, who suffers from asthma, might struggle bathing, I decided to help her directly. No, stop, that's enough, it's entirely your fault. Quote, Zix was one of the first people I contacted after returning from ELT Trading Company. I had heard that he returned early to campus because Elka had a conference to attend. I heard it from Yenica. She said she had run into you at the docks. Quote, yes, I returned to campus around the same time as Senior Yenica. We had a few conversations at the docks. Quote, what sort of conversation? What does it matter what you talked about? I can't even remember. It couldn't have been that significant. To elaborate, Yenica too was sitting near the campfire. Although it was awkward for Zix to evade the subject of their conversation at the docks, it did not seem a matter of importance to ponder upon. Besides Yenica and Zix, there were others present. But Ed Sr. was quite humble, which was surprising. Quote, Elvira Anise, the second-year alchemy department head, might have found the sight of Zix and Yenica casually sitting by the fire foreign, considering it was her first camp visit, but quickly took a seat near them. She certainly seemed adaptable. Why did you summon us all, looking so forlorn, when you usually speak so confidently with your requests? I had spent the entire day visiting Lortel, Trix, and Ophelius mansions. I reached out to anyone I had connections with, yet only a few could actually make it to help at the camp. Many students had not returned as the holiday was not yet over, and almost all staff members were not even attending their duties. This might turn out to be more troublesome than expected. And it might put you in an uncomfortable situation. Quote, the ELT Trading Company's Sylvania branch had almost completely fallen into Dunn's hands. Relying on support from the main office and endorsements from powerful backers, Dunn started winning over the employees one by one. Even though achieving this in just a month's vacation time was significant, when you consider his backers, it was not entirely surprising. With the second Princess Persica, the future head Slog, and Vice Headmaster Rachel in the mix. Considering Dunn's way with people, persuading the company's employees would have been easy. Even I hesitated given promises of early graduation, resettlement funds and long-term support from ELT. Still, I'm not asking for help for free. I promise compensation equivalent to the help. As you can see, I am now affiliated with ELT Trading Company. Quote, I stood up, showing off the cape emblazoned with the ELT Company insignia. Everyone around the fire wore odd expressions, but Yenica's was the most notable. So, Ed, you're now fully an ELT employee. For the time being, yes. Quote, currently. With that, I took a seat on the wooden workbench near the campfire. I looked down at everyone sitting around the fire pit. It was the right setting for a briefing. Lortel Caheln will be stepping down from the head position of ELT soon. She's been backstabbed. Quote, her name evoked different feelings in everyone. For Yenica, she was a girl with complicated feelings. For Zix, a mysterious merchant from the same A class. For Elvira, someone famous, though unimportant to her. Although I don't know how you all feel, I've received a lot of help from her over time, I can't just ignore that. Quote, I roughly briefed them about Dunn taking control of LT's Sylvania branch. The issue now was what I had to do. However, right now I can barely use any magic, and I'm not in great shape, I desperately need help. Quote, ahaha, so you want us to storm into ELT and snatch away Lortel? Elvira joked with a gleeful smile, though her words were grave. Even if you ask, you ought to consider our academic careers, Ed Sr., shouldn't you? That's right, Ed Sr. Besides, rescuing Lortel is unlikely to solve everything. Quote, Elvira and Zix had a point. Simply barging in, beating everyone up, and securing Lortel would be meaningless if it didn't address the core issues like power restructuring around Oldic or Princess Persica's support. Right. But we can't easily change the greater political landscape ourselves. There are right people for that. Quote, the right people. Princess Phenia will return soon, before the term starts. I received her letter. She's coming with Lucy. Quote, a carriage that left the royal capital Chloron, carrying Lucy, was heading toward Akan Island. As long as Lucy was there, we need not worry about the force aspect, and with Princess Phenia, capable of countering Princess Persica politically, we have a support to lean on. We hold out until Princess Phenia arrives. With royal power, we can make a play. Quote, I don't like Lortel very much. Quote, suddenly, a blunt remark cut through the conversation. A spirit summoner girl hugging her knees and warming by the fire had spoken. Zix, sitting diagonally across from her, swallowed and looked at Yenica. Yenica Sr. Quote, if I have to explain, I'd rather Ed not take such risks just to save Lortel. Quote, silence fell across the camp. Elvira looked on nonchalantly, tilting her head in slight bemusement. Looking at Yenica, her cheeks puffed up in irritation. It seems she wasn't pleased by the thought of me throwing myself into danger over Lortel. Although she always said she would help, she seemed reluctant to commit to Lortel's rescue. Yenica had her own feelings to consider. Despite previous conflicts, if Lortel was pushed to the brink, it would evoke her sympathy. However, Yenica was clear that she did not want me to endanger myself for Lortel's cause. Even so, once Ed makes up his mind, he tends to push forward. Quote, silence again. While Zix made awkward glances at Yenica, I tried to speak when Yenica raised her voice once more. So, what I can do is to make things a little less risky for Ed. Quote, I feel like I'm always causing you worry. Quote, it's okay, I'm the worrisome type anyway. So, what's the plan? Yenica's eyes were filled with determination. Although she disliked Lortel, she kept her personal feelings separate from the matter. Above all, Lortel had always been friendly toward me. It was better for my interest if she remained as the head of the company. Even after reaching a complicated conclusion, it was all self-justification. Yenica simply decided to support me and my ideas, which I was grateful for. As I said, even if we rescue Lortel, timing is crucial. Quote, why do we need to rush? Can't we just wait for Princess Phenia to return and report everything? Unfortunately, it seems we don't have time on our side. Quote, I hadn't extracted all the information from ELT. Most importantly, I had no idea how Dunn planned to dethrone Lortel. Politics ultimately come down to justification. To forcibly unseat Lortel, you need a compelling reason. Yet Lortel was always a principled leader, despite being somewhat cold-blooded. There was barely anything to pin on her, and Dunn was by far the dirtier of the two. Dunn wouldn't start such a risky venture without assurance. Lortel was confident that he could find a pretext to bring him down from his position, that's why he pulled off such a stunt. As the holidays come to an end, a new semester will start in Sylvania. By holding the acting Lord of Lortel captive and preventing him from doing anything until then, the problem will be resolved. Quote, however, there's a part that can be inferred from Durin's words. When the new semester starts, Lortel will be forced to step down as Lord. Meaning, Lortel must be taken away before the semester begins. Quote, so, are you saying that we should band together and beat them all up to take Lortel with us? When Elvira stated this bluntly, I shook my head. Then you wouldn't be involved. Quote, at that, Elvira let out an, oh, and laughed as if she had been hit where it hurt. It requires a bigger resolution than you think to throw mud into such a grand scheme involving the imperial family and the merchants of Oldic. Quote, I don't mind, but I am worried about the possible impact on the Islan family. Quote, I feel the same. The Iniston family has had its fair share of troubles because of me. Quote, that's why you need to participate in the plan of Elk Trading Company. Not to resist, but to cooperate. Quote, on hearing those words, Zix and Elvira briefly looked puzzled. They seemed not to understand what was being said. Your role is to block Tylee. Quote, what? As I was about to respond, I stopped myself with a raised hand. They must be thinking this is some nonsensical talk. I'm going to kidnap Aila. Quote, asterisk, Ed, is this really okay? Is this the right thing to do? In the middle of the night at the entrance to Lortel dormitory. Although not as luxurious as the Ophelius dormitory, the high-achieving student dormitory, Lortel, was much larger in size. Unlike Ophelius, which consisted of only one building, Lortel was made up of a total of 5, too large to take in at a glance. The reason for its larger size is simple. It houses many more students, though it is quieter than the general dormitory, Dex Hall. Since the holidays were not over yet, almost all the rooms were dark. Nonetheless, a few rooms of students who had returned early were lit, including a target room on the second floor, which had few lights on. After wandering around for a bit, I was able to find Isla's room relatively quickly. Don't worry, Yenica. I've taken care of everything so that we can handle this cleanly and without a trace. Quote, after I declared that I'd personally kidnap Aila, Yenica was taken aback and followed me. There will be no loose ends, everything's been arranged. Quote, what does that mean? Yenica was visibly conflicted as she followed me, as if she was grappling with a severe internal struggle. Kidnapping someone surely crossed a line, didn't it? Was that what she was thinking? I'm not someone who has lived so cleanly that I can make judgments about right and wrong. And hesitating out of guilt at this point is ridiculous. Yenica was clearly conflicted about getting an innocent person involved. She said she would fulfill any request, but could she really take part in such an overt criminal act? This was a dilemma that Yenica had to ponder deeply. But, it's Ed, so there must be a reason behind it. It's problematic to trust so blindly. It seemed better to show rather than keep explaining at length. However, Yenica seemed to have resolved her internal conflicts, clenched both her fists, and finally said, all right, let's go, Ed, I said it myself, ask me for any favor, With an overly solemn appearance, I, on the contrary, ended up swallowing my saliva nervously. Let's do this, we have to do it. With that, we headed towards the second floor window leading to Isla's room. Riding an elemental summoned by Yenica, we ascended quite easily. Getting near the window on the second floor of Lortel, we quietly raised it up. The door wasn't locked and opened easily. We're going in. Yenica firmly closed her eyes and lunged inside, and I followed suit. Inside a student's private room in Lortel, Isla's neatly arranged room came into view. Not too spacious, but the room had all the essentials. A study desk, a wardrobe, a bed, a small table, and even a private bathroom. The room had hints of girlishness. A few cute dolls here and there, family portraits from her hometown, and items like a hairbrush and handheld mirror were scattered about. The moonlight was the only source of light, casting a faint glow in the room. In the center of the room, Aila Trice sat demurely, her brown hair shining in the moonlight. Facing the window we entered from, her serene appearance was enough to send chills. As soon as we made eye contact, Yenica shuddered with surprise. It wasn't expected to be caught red-handed entering someone's room uninvited. She must have thought Aila would be asleep due to the darkness. Aila slowly lifted her head and said to us, "You're here." Quote. Wait a moment, please. I've already packed my bags. Let me grab my bag. Arg. Without showing much surprise, Aila fetched her pre-prepared suitcase. One change of clothes will do, right? Should I have packed toiletries too? Am I going to be tied up with ropes? Would it be better to wear clothes that can handle getting damaged? We're not going on a vacation, so minimize the baggage. Quote. Still, I prepared thoroughly because who knows what kind of environment I will end up in after being kidnapped. Indeed, she was a master educator. It wasn't her first time being kidnapped, her proficiency was evident, yet, from the kidnapper's perspective, it felt oddly unsettling. Quote. What's that strange look for? Quote. Yenica's expression is blank as she alternates glances between me and Aila. Her face seems to ask how this could proceed so naturally and smoothly. Between the company's affairs and Taylor's issues, it's a complex feeling, but since I'm needed, I have no choice. I owe a lot, so please take good care of me, Senior Ed. Watching Aila bow politely, Yenica looked on with an incredulous expression. Acknowledging Taylor's growth, helping him, dealing with the company's affairs all at once. Aiming to resolve concerns about the scenario, the power struggle entwined with ELT Trading Company, the curiosity about Taylor's specs, and the preparations for the upcoming Bellbrook subjugation. I quietly left with Aila. Wait, oh no, I didn't make my bed. I'll get points deducted by the dorm supervisor, can I please go back to make it now? After a small hitch when I had to take Aila back to her room to tidy up, we returned, the operation had been slightly delayed. Can this really be called a kidnapping? Isn't this a disservice to real kidnappers who kidnap people through arduous and sweaty efforts? A consensus report was filed. It was an agreement made by the Sylvania branch of ELT Trading Company. The content revealed a secret pact exchanged between Ed Rothtaylor, a student of Sylvania, and Duran Grex, an executive member of the Sylvania branch. The document symbolized the collusion between Ed Rothtaylor and ELT Trading Company. Oh ho ho! Inside the Rose Palace of the Chloral Imperial Palace, in the private chamber of the second princess. Listening to her aide's report, Princess Persica looked at the report with interest. Indeed, Duran Grex is savvy and perceptible. He quickly grasped what position Ed Rothtaylor held in the imperial family. By pulling him into ELT Trading Company, they created a connection that made those seeking power desire to control ELT Company. He was accustomed to raising his own value. It's a serpent-like trait typical of those skilled in manipulation. Because of this, Princess Persica became even more curious about the name, Ed Rothtaylor. The survivor of the Rothtaylor family, the hero of whom Lucy Maylol obsessively fixated, a fallen noble, and so many within Sylvania itself trying to bring him to their side. The merchant Slog must have played his cards. Single quote. The merchant Slog, who supported Princess Persica and the ELT Trading Company, had provided incremental assistance. Obviously, as a testimony of loyalty, he had built a bridge to Ed Rothtaylor. If ELT Trading Company falls under Princess Persica's influence, an official meeting with Ed Rothtaylor could be arranged, considering he was also a member of ELT Company. I'd like to meet him. Single quote. Princess Persica didn't even know what Ed Rothtaylor looked like. She had only heard of him through the grapevine. Yet, following recent developments, it seemed clear he was an extraordinary man. Even Princesses Sella and Phenia were on edge about his movements, deeming him a figure of great importance. But for Persica, he remained an enigmatic man shrouded in the shadows. Princess Persica smiled quietly, imagining Ed Rothtaylor. Dangerously, flights of fancy always tend in the most ideal direction. In her whimsy, imagining a figure lurking in the dark, Princess Persica neatly folded the document. The imperial power struggle will intensify. No longer the time to indulge in a fantasy world, as in days spent buried in the library with a pile of books. Princess Persica calmly stood from her seat and headed out of the Rose Palace. An era is shifting, and the power dynamics are poised to be overturned. Princess Persica had no intention of relinquishing power.